Hello, I'm Mary Spicer, and thank you for joining me behind fashion. In this unprecedented time, the fashion industry, like so many industries, is in distress. People around the world have joined together to demand the racial and social justice needed. No industry is exempt from this, and the hard work continues. I created this series so that we could help support each other as we move forward in the new fashion landscape. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to introduce you to many people behind fashion: producers, directors, choreographers, designers, and more. I will be taking questions during this webinar. If you are watching this live or at a later time, just text or email me. I look forward to collaborating with all of you and coming up with creative and interesting solutions for fashion shows and more as we move forward with a virus that discourages the interaction of people and the touching of clothing. What is the future of fashion, and what will our roles look like as we move forward? Today, it is my great pleasure to introduce all of you to Jeff Williams. Jeff was born in Pittsburgh and raised in New Jersey. He first knew that he wanted to be an actor in grade school, really, when he started with chorus concerts. In middle school, he moved on to more theatrical productions. When he graduated from Syracuse University with a theater major, Jeff moved to Manhattan within a couple of months. His first acting job was a summer season at a small theater in New Hampshire. All those that participated at the theater were asked to work in one of the shops. Although Jeff did grow up, his mother did sew quite a bit, and he did take home ec in 8th grade. He was put in the costume shop and started off very minimally sewing. But by the end of summer, he was sewing his own costume in satin. And he was told that sewing in satin, this is a very unforgiving fabric. As many of us know, if there's a small problem, that fabric is ruined. And I have a photo of that outfit. And look at this. I think this is a mandarin collar. I mean, this is a really nice job for a satin costume, Jeff.
It was pretty wild, and a very young me. So that's
within one. Well, that's very good. Home ec, congratulations.
Well, you know, we were so 8th grade for me was the mid-70s, and it was, you know, it was sort of revolutionary that boys were allowed to take home ec and girls were allowed to take wood shop, and that was only in my 8th grade class. Up till then, boys took wood shop, girls took home ec. But it was great. I think everybody should learn to cook and to do rudimentary sewing just to get through your life. So.
Absolutely, and yours was the first grade that was able to where boys could take home ec.
Yep.
Well, that's really amazing. I took woodworking growing up. I don't know if we were the first ones allowed, but there were only 3 of us girls in woodworking shops, yeah. And I loved it. Yeah. Now, Jeff, just to continue, Jeff started acting in both plays and musical theaters around the country. And his first Broadway show was in 2000 with the revival of Chitty, Chitty, Bang, Bang and The Pirate Queen. He also did a season of, you did 6 seasons of A Christmas Carol at Madison Square Garden and 1 season at the Radio City Christmas Spectacular, where you were the standby for Santa. But you performed several times a week as Santa Claus. And Jeff, you know, I do love these photos of you. And if I can find them, here you are as Santa. I love it. But even more interesting was this photo of the undergarments that you're wearing to play this character.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
Now, but why would they choose you to play Santa and then have you put on all this padding? I just mean, like, instead of maybe getting somebody who's larger, maybe a larger person to portray that.
I certainly wondered that when my agent called with the audition. I'm like, how do I do this? I was I think 35 or so at that time. And, but it was explained to me, they said, you have to have someone who is agile and physically fit enough it's a fairly athletic show. And if you got a much larger, older man, it just might be a bit much. The schedule is really rough there. We would do, I think it was 6 shows on Saturdays, starting at 9 in the morning, and the last one was at 9 in the evening. So I would do the first 2 shows every Saturday morning, and they're back to back. And I would come off stage, and the second picture you see with just the padding, everything would be like soaking wet underneath it.
How heavy is this?
It wasn't that it was so heavy. It was just that you have padding, and then you have your undergarments underneath it, and then you have the whole Santa suit on top of it, and then you run around maniac for 90 minutes.
Well, and I feel bad because I have not been to the Radio City Christmas Spectacular. Is Santa dancing?
Santa dances. He runs around. He's sort of the MC of the show.
Oh,
so it was truly. Radio City is a fairly magical place with the stage it has multiple elevator systems, so things are rising and moving and about, and it's sort of theater magic. Yeah. And it was a real honor to be a part of that for that year.
Oh, that's so nice. And I mean, Santa, that's the all-time role. Now, around that time, you also made your first foray into the world of TV and film with appearances on The Sopranos and The Producers. Mm-hmm. Since then, your life was, at that point, life started going into a balance of doing stage work, both in and out of New York City, doing TV work, and then finding the work that keeps things going between the acting jobs. One of your regular side gigs was working at a restaurant inside the Metropolitan Opera House at Lincoln Center. And I know that you had said many of the patrons were the true elite of New York City, and you could see the outfits coming and going, especially during Fashion Week, and you were exposed to all of that fashion that would come. Followed by that, in 2002, Jeff was elected to the governing board of the Actors Equity Association, the union that represents actors and stage managers working at theaters all across the country. He was a board member for 16 years, and that is where he met Judith Rice. In 2018, Jeff started to work backstage with Judith Rice and Associates, and that is when I met Jeff. That's when I met you. And welcome, Jeff, for coming on to my show.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. And did you get the mug? Because I'm never sure with, cheers to everything that you've done. And we're going to talk more because there's a lot that I haven't talked about yet, but they all come with questions. So
okay.
Cheers.
All right. First cocktail of the day.
Before we get into it, you live in Manhattan. I believe that much of your family is in New York. How are you and your family doing? Has anyone contracted COVID-19?
We've been very, very fortunate. I'm one of 5 kids. Everyone else is married and has kids, so our sort of immediate family now numbers 22. And and the only person who tested positive who was infected was my dad, who is 90 and in a nursing home, or he'll be 90 in just a couple of weeks. But miraculously, he never got sick. He tested positive, and then we had gotten that news, and you have to go through. You become the adult, the caretaker of your parents all of a sudden, because my mom has passed, and so we have to start making decisions about future for my father and health decisions, and et cetera, et cetera. And then I get a call about 10 days later. There was on my phone, I could see the area code, and you go, oh, it's Lebanon, Pennsylvania. I'm a little concerned. But she told me that my dad had passed through the danger zone without ever getting sick. So it was our miracle.
COVID is so random where some people it affects greatly, some not at all. Some get very sick. Some get sick for a very long time. Mm-hmm. It's just so odd as to who it's hitting.
Yes, there's anyone who follows Broadway news and social media and stuff, there's an actor, Nick Cordero, who, early 40s maybe, but in good health. And he was, I think he's still in ICU for going on 3 months now, and he had to have a leg amputated because of infections. So it is incredibly random that someone like that is having this horrible, horrible time. And we all pray that he will come through the other side. And then my dad at 90 in a nursing home, the most vulnerable people in our country,
Right.
kind of through it. So it's so hard to figure out, which I think makes sort of plotting our future so hard, because you don't know how it's going to impact people.
Wow. Yeah, and it's just very random, and it's changed a lot of how we behave. We just can't meet in person. We can't do things together. So,
but we did have a good family thing when my niece got married.
What?
And they had the wedding, and it was via live stream because we could not be there. And this was 10 days ago, and but they had planned a giant wedding for maybe 200 people with 12 bridesmaids. And then as these months have gone on since March, their plans have changed rapidly. But ultimately they said, we want to get married. We want to be a married couple. And so they did. And we all watched on our TVs and had a family text chain so that we could comment on everything that was happening. So.
Oh God! Actually, that sounds like a lot of fun, because usually we're not allowed to text or do cameras.
I know, it was.
That down. That's so fabulous. Who do you think is going to catch the bouquet? That's a really big bouquet. Do you think she's just going to throw that one? Maybe it's a different one.
And my brother-in-law almost tripped at one point, and so someone said, "Oh, Jeff almost face planted." So. Yeah.
Well, it's nice that we're making these workarounds, if you will, and we're still connecting with each other, and life is moving forward. It's differently, but it's moving forward.
Yes.
And I do want to start going into your background. There's a lot that I like to talk about. The bio is so brief, really, so that I could ask these questions. You were on a show called The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. You made an appearance. So I have to ask you, what was it like working with Ellie Kemper?
She was lovely. She was really, that shoot was kind of crazy. I had done The Sopranos, but that would have been a number of years before, and this was sort of the start of what has become a significant part of my career in doing TV work. And it was, TV shoots are strange, and they happen at strange times and in strange places. So this was out in Greenpoint in Brooklyn, which is one of these places you can't get to from here. You can't get to from anywhere. You have to change subways a couple times, but my call time was at about 6 a.m. on a Sunday, so I couldn't count on a subway even running.
Right.
So we get out there, and I was working in a restaurant at the same time. So I worked Saturday night at the restaurant. I think if memory serves, I had actually maybe popped a sleeping pill about an hour before my shift at the restaurant ended so that I could go home and crash for a few hours. And then got up and ran and did this. But we were in the kitchen of a Chinese restaurant. So it's very cramped. But, they're there. Tina Fey had written the show. Her husband was directing. So they were both there. Tina was very involved. And in between takes, someone would scurry over to me and say, Tina says this, or Tina said you paraphrased this, or you got these words backwards. But Ellie and I both made our entrance from the back door.
Oh.
If you've ever been out in the back alley of any restaurant in New York City, so she and I bonded a bit out there. She was a lovely, lovely woman to spend the day with.
And also, it's very glamorous back there, as I can imagine. So I do have a photo, because I love photos. There you are. Okay. And you're as an ICE agent.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And I have that is you and Lee Ki-hong as Dong.
Yes.
And then there's a better shot of you here, because I had to bring that one up. Oh, so maybe they just borrowed that outfit, that ice outfit. But when you and I had spoken before, you mentioned that at that time it was supposed to be on NBC. Wasn't that the first?
Yes.
Like some of the first episodes.
This was, they were shooting the first season, and we were, I think somewhere in the middle of that season was the episode I was on, and it was an NBC project, and they had asked for 13 episodes. And then at the end of that, NBC looked at it and said, "Oh, it's not for us. It's a little, it pushes the boundaries. It's a little edgy." And so I thought, oh, great, I get a nice TV job, and no one's ever going to see it. And then Netflix grabbed it, and the rest is history. And they actually, it was interesting to watch it over its years, because they were on Netflix and not on network TV, they could push the boundaries even further and push what they did in the show. But it was, yeah, and I think someone at NBC probably lost the job for making that call of, we're not going to go with this show.
Yeah, that's what you get for being afraid to talk about important subjects. Even, you know, in a comic way, these are things that are happening. You were also on Hulu's Difficult People.
Yes.
And here is a photo of you. Are you a director in here?
I am, yeah, I am the assistant director on a TV set.
And I'm sorry, just really quick, is this Billy Eichner from Billy on the Street?
That is Billy.
Love that. Now, how did this go? Did you get to talk to Billy over craft services, or?
That was a, you know, all TV is wacky in its own way. And that one, Difficult People shot in a different fashion than something like Kimmy Schmidt or any of the other TV I've done, which you shoot an episode at a time. You shoot episode 1, you move on to episode 2, you blah, blah, blah. Difficult People shot more in the way that a movie would shoot, in that they crossboard all the episodes so that they shoot everything that would happen in one location in one chunk of time. So the day I was down there, they were shooting, I think, 3 different episodes, or part of 3 different episodes. So they were also way behind schedule. So I spent, I think, close to 4 hours sitting in my trailer, which was not particularly exotic, on a side street in the East Village, waiting to be called to set. And then when they called me to set, the director introduced himself, and he said, "I got to tell you, we're way behind schedule, and Julie's not feeling well, so we have to just pound this out." And so we did that whole thing in, I think, 2 takes. And so there was no craft services. So
Oh yeah, just
it was get in, get out. And Billy, I chatted with a little tiny bit. Julie was not feeling well, so she sort of kept to herself on that one. But yeah, hit it, quit it, and they were so happy that I could come in and hit the marks and get it done for them. So
did you say Julia was the one who didn't feel well?
Julie Klausner, she was not feeling well.
Oh yeah, and
So.
you know, I now want to watch that show. I have not seen it, and I feel horrible about it.
It's funny, you know, and again, it's because it's not network. They can push the boundaries and hit some things.
And we've all gotten very used to that. Now we can go on the network and we say, well, I mean, outside of maybe a voice competition, there's not a lot that I can really get into, because they're not going into things properly. And I know I'm fanning out. Just bear with me for a moment. I do have a question about your work on Tales of the City.
Yeah.
And here, that's you, and I love that. So this is another outfit, but oh, is that Ellen Page? Did you have craft services with Ellen Page? How was it working with her?
We had a lot of time that day. We shot up at they had rented a really gorgeous property up in Purchase, New York. And that's someone's house. That is actually, we're sitting around someone's kitchen. And they had that out, you know, yeah, how the other half lives. So, and we spent the day there, but there, you know, on that one, there was a lot of moving the cameras. You set up a shot, and then they tell those of us who are speaking in the scene that we can go take some time, and they'll work, and they have stand-ins for each of us, and they deal with focusing the lights and making sure all the technical details are done. And we sat off in a small pantry room off the dining room of this house It was Ellen and Michael Park, and Josh is the guy in the picture with me, and the four of us had many hours sitting there.
Wow.
Ellen's a very intense woman, and she's very political, and and I was the only one she didn't know. She had been working with Michael on the series. She and Josh had worked on other things, but as the day went on, we had some lovely conversations, and that's that's how TV goes. You sort of figure people out as the day goes on. So
yeah, it's always nice to hear that people are kind of who we imagine. Sometimes there are surprises, but for the most part, I like that she's definitely Ellen Page.
Yeah.
No, and to talk about, like, I think in each of these you have different outfits. We talked in the beginning, you were on stage in A Day in Hollywood. That's what you made this outfit for, out of satin. But that's not the norm, to make your own costume or come up with your own costume, right? Usually you have a costume designer, and you sent me this photo. And can you tell me a little bit about this costume figure?
That is that's from the Will Rogers Follies, Tommy Tune show that I toured with for about 18 months. And our costume design, that was the opening of Act 2. Danette, the woman in the middle, she was not in the same scene with us, which is why her costume looks nothing like the world that we are in.
Yeah, I don't think they would allow that.
No, that was us right before we went on stage. But it was, the number was the campaign when Will Rogers ran for president. And the designer on that was a woman named Willa Kim. She won the Tony for her designs on that show. She was an extraordinarily inventive costume designer for the theater and did brilliant work. And on that particular one, if you hold it up again, you can see there's a white line that runs down the chaps.
This one.
And the men in the number, for the women, it was fairly straightforward because they were all sitting in a straight line across the front, and they did this little sort of hand jive with Will. And it's a phenomenal number. But the men, we were in the beginning of it, we were seated and then standing. And so when I went to my fitting, I was the first of the four men in the show to go to my fitting. We spent an inordinate amount of time with Willa and the costume shop having to figure out where this white line should lie on my legs, so that would it be straight when I was seated or straight when I was standing, because I guess they are mutually exclusive because of the way our bodies are shaped. So, and it was not crazy making, but we had 2 weeks of rehearsal. I had just come back from doing another show, and during these 2 weeks was also moving out of my apartment. So there was a lot going on, and I'm sitting there in this fitting forever with them moving a white line on my leg. But then ultimately you realize that that's where the genius is.
Yes.
Is in details like that. And we see it in the work we do in runway stuff. That's where the genius is, in the detail, and that's what takes it from being clothing to being fashion. And that's what takes Willa's work in this to a level that other people would not necessarily deal with that kind of detail.
Well, it's like we quite often say, it takes a lot of work to look this natural.
Oh yeah.
And it's not so much, it's not always in your face. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just those little details. As a dancer, if your legs are moving and that stripe is on the front, but you're constantly seeing the side, you're missing the whole thing.
Yeah.
It also tells you when somebody's out of step.
Yes.
Now, there's another show that you were in. Oh gosh. I think you had a costume designer for this, Blacklist, and you look so dapper.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
And I just love this outfit and the detail of the shoes.
Yes, and I don't know that you would call him the costume designer, but he was in charge of me. And so I went down and had to meet with him. Their studios were down at Chelsea Piers here in the city. And I showed up, and I think I had probably ridden my bike down and had on jeans and a t-shirt and my hiking boots. And I walked in, and he looked slightly aghast that he had to try and turn that into that picture you see. And I'm not always the best at things like that. And when we first started doing the runway stuff, I didn't always know exactly what to wear when we were backstage, and there might have been a few rolled eyes in my direction, but I've learned. But he took, this young man took about 2 hours to put together this whole look for me. And you walk into a room and they purchased 10 suits in my size and 10 shirts and ties and shoes and everything, and meticulously putting it together with tie pin and the pocket square and everything to create this look. And if in the background, you can see I had a beautiful Chesterfield top coat that went over it all.
Yeah.
And then the crazy thing is, you never see it in the show, or you barely see it. It's used in an establishing shot as I cross a lobby and then head into my hotel room. So, yeah. That's about
actually, so I'm like playing the video and trying to get the picture, but this, I mean, in the lobby, it was so fast. And then the longest you stood was at that elevator to go up. And it was very quick, but I'll tell you what, you really knew who this character was just by the clothing. And you do notice.
And clothing defines us, what we choose to wear. And it's very much, he helped me immeasurably to take a character that had 2 lines, and by this look he put together, I knew how to walk across the lobby of the hotel.
It does change your whole body.
Yeah, how you walk, and so, and all fashion does that. I certainly learned that in my years at the Met, watching people how they dressed and what they chose to wear to present themselves. So yes, but that was a lot of money and a lot of time for a look that no one really saw.
But then then they saw you more in this lovely look.
Yeah, me and my underwear. So, but it was even then, there were multiple pairs of silk boxers. Which boxers are the right ones? And then, and again, getting into the difference between broadcast TV, because Blacklist is NBC, as opposed to something that's on Netflix or something. Underneath the silk boxers, they were very adamant that I had several pair of underwear on. Not just one, but multiple pairs of underwear, because as they kept saying to me, nothing can move. So it's TV.
It is TV.
TV, network TV. And so that was of paramount importance that everything stay in its proper place. So.
And you started working New York Fashion Week in 2018. You were a new kid on the block. And walking in backstage at a fashion show, what are the immediate differences between backstage of a fashion show and backstage at the theater, let's say?
Well, at the theater, fashion shows are set up for space to change your clothes, because that's what it's about. Whereas at a theater, for all the glamour of a Broadway theater, and the lights and the tech and the beautiful costumes and everything, when you get backstage, these are old buildings with not a whole lot of space. So you run off stage and there's a wall, and there's the fly rail, and there's the crew guys, and there's the other set pieces that have to come on. So when you're doing quick changes, you're having to create space, and you're all on top of each other. And we're on top of each other at fashion, but you walk back and it's something that is truly just set up for that environment. Mm-hmm. But you have to get used to who are all these people, and what is their attachment, what do they have to do with today's event, and it's a big learning curve. But
especially like I think we talked earlier about the photographers. Is this photographer, because some photographers can stay during the show, or even just one, and then everyone else must leave because the models are changing, and so it's basically they've chosen the photographer that they trust.
Some of them really are very tenacious about trying to get back there and stay back there. So you learn about that, and it's also, as you mentioned, sort of all the photography and everything. It's fascinating to watch the models. Mm-hmm. All of the social media is such a huge part of all of our lives, and we all have to self-promote. And I certainly do as an actor. But and the whole thing of social media influencers, and we take pictures of our food now, and we do all of that. But you watch the models that we work with all through the day, through through hair and makeup, when they're just sitting there, they're taking pictures of themselves, someone else is photographing them, and they live that way. And I always say I want one of them to give me a lesson on the art of the selfie, because they do it beautifully. I look
every time.
yeah, but they just, boom, hit that pose. So, and there's an art to that.
There is an art to that. And, there's a reason why, there are professional models that we go to. They hit it every time. Now, we're coming towards the end, and
Sure.
You live in Hell's Kitchen.
Yes.
And you said that neighborhood is really dependent on the theater. And it was just announced that I believe Broadway said they're not opening until 2021.
The official announcement is that they are now refunding tickets through January 3rd, 2021, and sort of figuring out how things come back after that. Hopefully we'll be in a place where people will feel comfortable coming to a public event like that, and that there will be protections for everyone who works backstage, front of house, all the employees, as well as the audience. And that will take time, and it won't be, I don't think the plan right now is any sort of January 3rd, Broadway is back. I think it will be a slow rollout through the next several months. Other places, the Metropolitan Opera, that I'm very familiar with, having spent enough years working there, their announcement was that they will come back with a gala New Year's Eve event.
Okay.
The form of it is to be determined, but they want to open with a gala, and just boom, we're back. And fingers crossed that they will be able to do it. It's going to be a long 6 months with sort of no culture in New York. I mean, some museums may start to open, but live performing arts will not come back until after the new year.
But even more than that, I mean, we're getting to the point where there's no work. Cirque du Soleil, it has gone they've claimed bankruptcy. A lot of people they've lost their jobs. And so how can we help, Jeff? Is there some program that that we as viewers could help those in the industry?
Oh, absolutely. I always say, encourage people, if you want to help those of us in the arts, support the Actors Fund, which is a service organization that works. It's called the Actors Fund, but it is truly for anyone within the performing arts industry, backstage, on stage, and it's supporting people. They have there's financial support. Obviously, they have a health center. They have the Al Hirschfeld Health Clinic, and they also have a huge number of I guess you'd call them classes and seminars to help people find other work in times when you can't find the on-stage work.
Right.
So
right. That's just so important, because fashion is not just models. You're talking about casting agents, lighting crews, choreographers, set design, all of that. Everybody's on hold, and it truly is an unprecedented time for all of us. And we're just under so much stress. So to the audience, everyone, if you can and would like to help, please give to the Actors Fund to help not just actors, but all professionals in theater, television, movies, dance, radio, music, and opera. That's www.actorsfund.org. And Jeff,
Sure.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's good to see you. I miss our families that we create in all our weird little businesses. So I miss seeing you.
I hope I get to see you soon. Fingers crossed.
All right. All right.
Okay. Bye-bye. And thank you all for attending this week's Behind Fashion series with my guest, Jeff Williams. Jeff's website is www.jeffwilliamsonline.com. Next week, I will be joined by fashion designer Kavanaugh Baker. See you all next week, Wednesday, July 8th at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, noon on the East Coast, 9 a.m. on the West Coast, and 5 p.m. British Summer Time. All the best to you and yours, and have a happy 4th of July.